Hello and welcome back to Continental Club, where we discuss the hottest topics in European football. It's Henry Hill, it's Michael McCubs, it's myself, Dougie Critchley, joining you on this Friday afternoon. We've got a bumper show lined up for you today. It's set to be an absolute cracker. But before we get stuck into that, let's find out how the lads are. Henry, how are you on this Thursday morning? You feeling okay?
Oh, sorry. I was just telling you that I'm filming this on my radiators to try and get better lighting because the new room in my setup isn't great, and I've got my towel is the smell of my towel, because freshly washed towel isn't great right now. So this is, I'm not feeling. It's not very rock star what's going on. But the thing I have liked is it's that time of year where different teams are releasing their shirts for next season, which is I always find that quite fun. Like I like the AC Milan one, different lines. I like the Chelsea one they've just released. I don't know if any of you boys have seen any of those, or having any other home studio problems like me.
I saw the AC Milan one. I thought it was very smart, actually. And Inter Milan seemed to be playing in a different one last night as well, which I'm not sure whether that's the new kit or whether that's some sort of third kit going on as well. But I didn't particularly like that one, but I was a fan of the AC Milan one. McCubs, have you seen any hot new shirts this week?
Not really, no. No, I was just thinking, actually. Yeah, no, I've kind of missed that, to be honest. I feel like I saw a lot of the ones that, like, you know, the leaked ones which come out around February, which are usually complete rubbish, and never end up being the actual kits. But I've not really seen any of those. Although there are those nice like vintagey kind of England ones which have come out recently, which Joe's been posting about on his Instagram, which I'm very jealous of.
That black one is amazing.
Yeah, really, really nice. So I'm just considering getting the England shirt for the Euros, to be honest. Just the standard one. It's just the nicest one there's been in about 20 years, isn't it? So
I love it.
So just waiting for payday for that one.
Payday, big payday. Get that Black England strip on. It is an absolute beauty. Anyway, let's get into today's show, because today we're discussing players wasted at their current clubs. That's because Anthony Golgol said who has to move this summer for their own career. Now, we're expecting quite a relatively quiet summer of business, perhaps. I think Jadon Sancho might move, but I don't think we'll see that many massive moves. But there's plenty of players whose performances over the last few years suggest that they are better than their current club, and plenty of players that aren't getting a lot of game time at their current clubs who probably need to move for the sake of their own career. Now, McCubs, we're going to kick off with Paulo Dybala at Juventus, who actually played very well last night, but it's been a difficult campaign for him.
Yeah, really difficult. I mean, obviously he's 27 years old now. He's should be in his kind of prime, peak physical condition and whatnot, but that's very much not been the case this year. Obviously, he's been a very consistent starter, been one of the key men for Juve for a number of years now. Obviously, kind of came through kind of in the early 2010s when I think it was kind of him and Raheem Sterling really were the two outstanding youngsters in Europe. And I think it's quite telling in some ways that I don't know, we were kind of expecting them to be the ones contesting Ballon d'Ors, and it seems to be that it's kind of passed them by in terms of the new gen that's come through now. And Dybala in particular, I think, has had a difficult few years, especially since Ronaldo came in and has become the kind of main man since 2018. I think that's certainly kind of stunted his ascension to what would have been the kind of poster boy for Juve. Actually, arguably, he was the poster boy already, but in terms of being that, being the talismanic figure each and every game for the club, leading the line, being top scorer, kind of season on season, that obviously hasn't been the case. And Juve made that play for Ronaldo for kind of short-term success, and now they're left with the choice of, whether they stick with Ronaldo or Dybala, essentially. I think it's going to be one of them that leaves this summer, isn't it? I think they're obviously both coming into the final 12 months of their contract. But I think if they were to sell both this summer, that would really be very, very silly of them. I know that there's been a bit of chat about that, but I can only see one of them going. He's only made 24 appearances this term. He's only been given 13 starts and 6 off the bench, which totals just over 1,000 minutes. He's 17th in the squad for minutes in Serie A. That's below Chiellini, Artur and Ramsey. He's only got 4 goals and 2 assists, one of which came on Wednesday night. But I mean, I think it's a little bit harsh to say he's had like a flop of a season, because it's been completely marred by injuries, hasn't it? He's missed 21 games through injury, which completely kind of curtailed his comeback midway through the season, because even before the season had started, he was injured. He had gastroenteritis, which I believe, I've not had it myself, but I believe is pretty grim. So he came into the season, unfit and physically weak, obviously after a very difficult summer as well. He missed their Champions League tie in the summer as well, didn't he? So and obviously the fallout from COVID as well. I believe he got COVID quite early on as well. So just a really I think he's cut out of a lot of star players in Europe. He's come off the last kind of the madness of the last 12 months in worse shape than most. Because let's remember, he was the MVP in Serie A last year. He's still got very good underlying numbers as well. He's taking 3.8 shots per 90. He's averaging 2.5 key passes, 2.1 dribbles, 0.56 expected goals and assists per 90, which isn't at the level which you'd expect considering those numbers, which are pretty world class. However, like I said, it's been a tough season, and one in which, when he has been out, Pirlo has kind of found solutions in terms of playing Morata and Ronaldo up front together, which has worked really well. Obviously Chiesa, especially in the second half of the season, has really emerged as a key player for them, and it now looks like he's going to be that man in the long run for Juve. I think it's harsh on him and Pirlo to say that he's been kind of wasted this season, because I think it's just been one of those freak years whereby he hasn't really got a break. But I think if we were speaking about Juve last week, and I think if it was up to me, I think you get Ronaldo off the wage bill, and you promote Dybala into that role. I think that the question will be is that 4-4-2 formation actually suited to Dybala? I'm not 100% sure, because I haven't really seen him operate in it all that much, especially as the main guy. Will him and Morata be able to kind of link up in the way that him and Ronaldo did? Again, not totally sure. I think that's been a little bit of a difficult one with Dybala, with Ronaldo there. We haven't seen really the best of him since Ronaldo's been there. So hopefully, we'll get to see more of him next season.
Yeah, it'll be interesting about whether he stays or goes. I mean, over the last few years, there's been so much speculation about moves, particularly to Spurs, Man United that summer as well, PSG, Real Madrid, of course, as well. But I can't really see any team going for him on the back of this year, at least. He definitely doesn't seem like his, the valuation that Juventus have for him isn't going to be matched this summer, unless they try and use him in a player swap deal, which Juve have tried to do in the past. If they're trying to, get around a bit of financial fair play, keep their outgoings down this summer. So we'll see what happens with Dybala.
I was going to ask though, if you guys if he was to leave this summer, is there a club you could see him fitting in at? Because I'm not 100% sure I can see one.
It's difficult, isn't it? I mean, he's played his best football as a number 10 in my opinion, and so few teams play with an out and out 10 these days. I mean, I'm struggling to sort of imagine maybe if Lautaro Martinez left Inter Milan, but he's sort of speculating that he wants to sign a new deal there. I don't really know. Henry, have you got any suggestions?
Maybe somewhere like Atletico, somewhere that would really kind of cry out for a bit of creativity, I think, because he could almost, play that just off the striker as well and drop out into the wings there, because I do get a bit concerned about the lack of sort of forward options there. So somewhere like Atletico, but I remember the kind of wage demands he had last year. I think he was playing hardball because he didn't really want to go to Spurs. But his wage demands are going to be difficult wherever he tries to go. But maybe Spain. I think Spain might be his best bet.
Yeah, I think he's on about 10 or 12 million pounds per season as well. I remember his image rights are really complicated, which is why that move to Spurs fell down when Pochettino was there, I believe. But speaking of Spain, Henry, let's talk about a Spanish youngster in Riqui Puig who hasn't really got a look in this year.
Yeah, image rights, what a load of nonsense. Yeah, Riqui Puig is a really interesting one, isn't it? To try and figure out what to do with him, really, because he's 21 years old, so he's not as young as I think some people assume he might be, and he was playing regularly at the end of the sort of the Quique Setien era, but Ronald Koeman just doesn't seem to fancy him at all. It's no secret that Koeman wanted him, I think, to leave the club last summer. I think he made that pretty clear, and they almost loaned him out to Ajax, which I think would have been the perfect solution to that situation. But they wanted to bring in Wijnaldum in return, and they couldn't get him. So Puig stayed on the books. And to be honest, I don't really see what the point was, because he's been given 289 minutes in the league and in Europe too. That's one of the lowest numbers at the whole club, really. We talk about Pjanic being out in the cold. Pjanic has played more than Riqui Puig this year, and it kind of goes against the philosophy of what you'd expect for Barcelona. Certainly their kind of emphasis on La Masia, and it's not as if Koeman doesn't like other youngsters. He's given Elias Moriba minutes. Obviously Pedri's been a huge part of that team this season. I think he's played 50 games so far, which is absolutely huge as well. And Ronald Araujo's come into defence there and proved to be a pretty useful asset. I mean, it's kind of hard to read into Puig's performances this season based on those minutes. He rarely ever plays over 10 minutes in a single game. I think it's only happened 4 times in La Liga. He did manage to get a goal in a 3-minute cameo against Elche in January. But look, I tried to do a bit of research going into this about why Koeman doesn't like him. Koeman favours the 4-2-3-1 formation, which he used for the Netherlands, and that gets the best out of Frenkie de Jong, who plays on the left side of the two-man pivot, often next to Busquets as well. Apparently he just does not like the idea of Riqui Puig dropping into that formation there, and often when they do go to a 4-3-3, that's when Pedri tends to drop back a bit. And I think Puig played against Juventus in the Champions League, and they did get a little bit exposed there. So he doesn't seem to fancy him there. And when he was asked about this the other day, he said it was to do with training and tactical awareness and stuff like that. Koeman seemed to imply that he doesn't change his team around very much, which is kind of true, I suppose, if you do look at kind of the more regular starting members of that team. Like I said, Pjanic doesn't feature all too much. Sergei Roberto hasn't had a ton of minutes either. But even so, 289 minutes is pretty abysmal, and I've seen a lot of I was looking at some fan forums who are saying that it's absolutely rubbish that Puig can play in that pivot position. His tackling numbers are pretty awful. I think it's like 0.3 tackles and interceptions per game, but once again, that's based on very few minutes, so it's hard to really quantify it and give him a fair running there. And he is more attacking orientated as a player. And that's maybe where Barcelona do have kind of a system set up which maybe he struggles to feature in. However, I don't know about you guys, but I think to have hardly used him at all is a really damning indictment of Koeman's opinion on him. And I mean, surely, McCubs, I think he's good enough to justify way more minutes than that, and could have actually been a bit more useful, considering that Barcelona are kind of one of the more ball-heavy sides in La Liga.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like it's become almost a bit of a cliche that like whenever Riqui Puig comes on, like the team suddenly looks a little bit better, looks a bit brighter. Obviously, it's easy to say that when it's like late in games and you've got fresh legs on the field and whatnot. But like towards the end of the Setien era, I say it was like half a season, wasn't it? But towards the end of Setien's tenure, he always looked like one of the best players on the field, didn't he? And so yeah, it did seem a bit strange that Koeman kind of wrote him off so quickly. I mean, he wanted him to go out on loan, didn't he? But I don't know. I think it's difficult because clearly, you know, since Koeman's kind of switched things up a little bit since the turn of the year, Barca have generally been pretty excellent, and Pedri's been a massive part of that. And when Pedri's in that team so often, there just isn't really a space for Puig, is there? Because he's not, he's not a defensive powerhouse. He's not. I personally don't think is necessarily as good on the ball as Pedri. I think he's potentially a better passer than him. And I think his game intelligence, personally, I think is right up there too. But yeah, it just seems like there isn't really a space in that midfield. Having said that, yeah, like in a season this congested, you still would have thought that he would have got some minutes. And it's clear that Koeman, just would prefer him not to be there, would prefer him to be getting minutes elsewhere, I guess. So yeah, it's a difficult one because at this moment in time, it doesn't look like Koeman's going to leave the club. So yeah, I do think in the summer, Puig does really need to get out there. He's at an age now where he needs to be playing week in, week out, isn't he? So yeah, I would certainly suggest he tries to force a loan move this summer. I imagine the club will probably be trying to do that.
I completely agree with you. Apparently, Laporta is actually quite annoyed about this situation as well. That's one of the rumours coming out of the club because he wants to do that. It says here that apparently Atletico, Spurs and Arsenal are all interested in him. My thinking, I think if you look at like maybe what Brahim Diaz has gone to AC Milan and done there, if we look at the early success of Philip Coutinho at Inter Milan, earlier in his career. I personally would love to see. I'm not sure England's the right place for him. I'd love to see him move to like a Sassuolo or something like that, or Atalanta in Italy, or maybe a 2-year loan deal. If you look at Borja Mayoral, how well he's doing at Roma, I'd like to see him go there. I don't think Mourinho's the right manager for Puig right now. But yeah, Dougie, I mean, what do you think about that? I think Italy, or maybe more Spain, like a Celta Vigo type, that might be the best place.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to sort of analyse where he'd be best placed to go because we've seen so little of him playing. And I'm with you guys. I think it's been a real blot on Koeman's pretty good copybook from his first year that he hasn't given him more game time, especially with their injuries they've had at the back, which has seen Frankie de Jong often play, at centre-back. Surely there would have been a slot in midfield for him, especially when they've switched to 3-4-3 or 3-5-2, as we've seen in recent weeks. But yeah, he's come up against Pedri, who has been phenomenal this year, and it's been difficult for him to break in. But I do think he offers a lot in terms of his dribbling. He's really dynamic. I agree with McCubs. Whenever he comes on, the play seems a lot quicker. And I just think he's got a massive, massive future. But at 21, he needs to start getting some minutes somewhere. So we'll see what happens with him in the summer. But I'm kind of with you. I think Spurs or Arsenal would seem like a bit of a risk at the moment, given their current issues, to throw a 21-year-old who's fairly lightweight into there as well. I think that could go down quite badly. So those are two players that we feel are, maybe not getting the minutes they deserve, although in Dybala's case, more injury, in Riqui Puig's case, more managerial issues. But there are some players we wanted to bring to the table who seem too good for their current clubs, who are wasted at that standard. And I think the obvious shout in this category is Rodrigo De Paul. He's now 26, Argentinian midfielder. He's got many, many caps for Argentina. I think it's over 20. And he's been exceptional for a number of years, really. He's contributed at least 10 league goals in each of the last 4 seasons, with his 18 this season, which is 9 goals and 9 assists, the best of his career to date. He's incredibly versatile. He can play on the right, he can play on the left, he can play as a sort of 6 in a midfield 3, but he's best as a number 10, I believe. And he stacks up really well against the rest of Serie A, despite playing for an Udinese team who have been mediocre, really, for his time there. They've really failed to kick on from that sort of Alexis Sanchez era of the early 2010s. And yeah, Rodrigo De Paul's numbers compared to the rest of Serie A are really quite special, actually. He ranks 14th for shots, 2nd for key passes in the whole division. I believe that's behind Hakan Çalhanoğlu. 10th for passes into the final third, and 1st for passes into the penalty area in the whole of Serie A.
So good.
So he's performing at a level which is sort of league high. He has a contract until 2024, so it might be difficult to get him this summer. He was obviously heavily linked with a move to Leeds last summer. Apparently, paper talk this week is that Liverpool are very interested in him, along with Houssem Aouar, who is a slightly different player as well, but versatile as well, can play on the left wing, left of a midfield 3 as well. Potentially, I'd probably go for Rodrigo De Paul. I think it'll maybe be slightly cheaper as well. There's talks that Liverpool have opened talks with his agent Mino Raiola this week. Juventus are also said to be interested in him as well. But he needs to move on from Udinese, who aren't really going anywhere particularly quickly at the moment. And it feels a bit like Chiesa at Fiorentina last year. Like, these players are just shining in lower half teams. And Rodrigo De Paul deserves a move. And at 26, I think he could be a really exciting signing for any club in Europe, really. Particularly that Liverpool, Leeds, Juventus links. I think all of them make sense. That Juve midfield is crying out for more creativity. So I think he'd be a great option there. Guys, okay, we'll go back to McCubs. McCubs, Who else is your sort of too good for their current club shout?
We've got Filip Kostic down here, don't we? I think this has been something over the last kind of 2.5 years. He's been excellent, hasn't he, at Eintracht Frankfurt, obviously first with Stuttgart and Hamburg as well. But yeah, he's just been completely essential to, potentially the essential player to Adi Hutter's style of play, isn't he? He's so direct. He's so sound, both defensively and going forward. He contributed 10 goals and 13 assists in 18-19. That was when Jovic and Haller were at the club last term. 12 goals and 18 assists. So he kind of really stepped in when they didn't have quite as much firepower up top. This season, 4 goals and 15 assists. So he's so kind of consistent over the last few years. Only Müller has created more assists than him in the Bully this term. He ranks 2nd for chances created, 2nd for passes into the penalty area. This is a guy who's just a kind of consummate professional, has been performing at such a good level for such a long time, and yet there hasn't really been that much interest in him. I think Inter wanted him last year. They were the only real standout club last season, and he would have been perfect in this Inter side, wouldn't he? Imagine just how much even more productive they would have been with a wing back of Kostic's standard on the left flank. To him and Hakimi, that would have just been ridiculous. And we'll get on to Inter in a bit, but yeah, it's just a shame that we haven't seen him in the Champions League yet. And of course, it looks like Frankfurt could scupper their chances. Obviously, they were pretty far ahead, and now they're 1 point behind Dortmund as it stands. Inter apparently could be interested in him again this summer. So I really hope that Kostic for his sake is playing Champions League football in the next couple of years.
Yeah, got to be in the mix for sure. I think, you're right. At Inter Milan, such a step up on Ashley Young and even Perisic, who has actually done surprisingly well at left wing back this term. But Kostic would be a great addition. Although I don't know how much, I don't know his defensive output quite yet. I know he's absolutely lethal going forward, but maybe Antonio Conte would be slightly worried about that with Hakimi having such a free rein on the other flank. Henry, who would you like to bring to the table for players too good for their club?
I want to just quickly shout out Matheus Cunha at the useless Hertha Berlin. He's only scored 7 this year, but that's really not his fault. He's one of the most creative players in that Hertha side, who I just can't quite get my head around what's gone wrong for them. But I think the other player we should mention, this is an interesting one, is Sergei Milinkovic-Savic over at Lazio. He also is 26 years old, so entering a point a bit like Rodrigo De Paul, where maybe he's starting to look around and think, I want to be competing for titles, for trophies consistently every season. Don't get me wrong, what Lazio have achieved recently in the last few seasons under Inzaghi as their coach has been excellent. But this season, again, we've seen them drop off a little bit. They're sick, 5 points off Juve and 21 off Inter Milan at the top. And I think in Serie A only looks to be getting more competitive. But for Milinkovic-Savic, he's backed up a brilliant 1920 campaign with another one. He's got 8 goals and 9 assists in 31 league games. 2 shots, 1.4 key passes, 0.9 dribbles. And this is, for me, the most interesting part. 3 tackles and interceptions, because we're talking about a big box-to-box enforcer. And that's the kind of player that all the big clubs absolutely love. He's got a little bit of everything, doesn't he? If we look at, we just talked about Riqui Puig, maybe a slightly more limited. Milinkovic-Savic looks like a leader, a real presence in the middle of the park there. I'd love to see him go to a bigger side. I was just thinking PSG, that'd be the kind of perfect place for him. They sort of struggle to have someone at the moment that can break lines either direction. Real Madrid, I'm not sure they could possibly afford a player like him at the moment. Manchester United are always linked with him too. That's another move I'd like to see happen. Maybe if Pogba did leave, who quite knows what that situation is. But yeah, I think Milinkovic-Savic, I've always been impressed every time I see him play. Lazio obviously did quite well in the Champions League, got through the group stages there. So clearly he's got top level pedigree, and he's really excellent for Serbia when he plays there too. So yeah, I agree. I think maybe now is the time for him to look elsewhere.
Yeah, sadly, I just think if it wasn't such a COVID-affected market, I think he probably would be ready to move. But the price Lazio are going to ask, it's going to be £60 million plus, I would have thought. It'd be difficult for him to move this summer. But I totally agree. I think he's a magnificent player. Great in both boxes as well. Pulls his weight defensively, as you say. I'm struggling to think of which other clubs. Yeah, this summer it's going to be really difficult. I actually weirdly thought Everton might be a good fix for him, because I think some of their midfielders are a little bit average. I think Andre Gomez and Davies, could maybe have a step up on him as well, but maybe doesn't fit where they're trying to go stylistically. So we'll see what happens there. 2 more names for the hat. I think Daniel Marlin has had another excellent season at PSV. 22-year-old has scored 10 plus league goals for the 3rd consecutive season. This year he's on 18 goals and 7 assists. PSV have been nowhere near Ajax this year, so he potentially is one to have a look at. And then we need to give a shout out to Gerard Moreno as well, who's been excellent for Villarreal. Probably won't get a move this summer just because of his age, 29 years old, but 21 goals and 5 assists in 30 league games this season. It really hinges on that Europa League final against Man United. If they get into the Champions League, why would he leave? But if they don't, maybe he'd think, he could get a slot in someone else's roster. I sound so American. Slot in someone else's roster in the Champions League. But yeah, they're 4 points behind 5th place Real Sociedad as it stands. So it doesn't look like they're going to be qualifying through the league. But guys, those are our shouts for Players wasted at their current clubs. Too good or either not getting enough game time, but I'm sure there are plenty of players we've left off. Get them in the comments down below, and let's move on to our big match preview. So we were spoiled for choice this weekend in terms of big match previews, because Roma take on Lazio on Saturday night in the Derby della Capitale. It's then RB Leipzig versus Wolfsburg on Sunday, and Lille take on St Etienne as they look to close in on their first top flight title since 2011. The whole football world is behind Lille right now. Go on, Lille. But there's obviously a massive game in La Liga as well between Athletic Club and Real Madrid. Really tough place to go, the San Mamés. So that'll be interesting about Real Madrid's title challenge, whether they can get a win there. But having talked about Barcelona and Atleti last week and Barcelona versus Valencia, we are leaving La Liga for this weekend, and instead we are talking about the biggest game in Serie A this weekend. It's the Derby d'Italia between Juventus and Inter Milan on Saturday at 5 p.m. as the new champions take on the fallen champions, who are in 5th at the time of recording. Well, no, they'll be 5th at the time of the game as well. They've all played last night. Henry, host Juventus, it's a huge game for them. Less so for Inter, but massive for Juve.
So I just want to say, I love this time of year. It feels like every game is just big at the moment, doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, there's so many big matches going on, and this is for Juventus.
Except for Chelsea Arsenal, that was a shambles. But.
Oh yeah, that is true. But this game is ginormous for Juventus and their ambitions. They did manage to pass a hurdle on Wednesday, beating Sassuolo 3-1. But that 3-0 defeat to AC Milan, pretty sort of conclusive as well. Hardly had a look in that game. Has left them in a bit of predicament here. Like you said, 5th in the table, 1 point behind 4th place Napoli. Atalanta and AC Milan are a further 2 points ahead. And their run-ins, as I think we'll explore, are a bit easier than Juventus's. This is their big crunch match against Inter Milan. Now, if you look at them as a team, statistically speaking, they maybe don't deserve necessarily to be where they are. They're first for XG against, second for XG behind Atalanta, and best team according to expected points. However, ultimately their head-to-heads in the big games has been entirely lacking this season, hasn't it? They've been really poor when it comes up against their kind of top 4 rivals. They've lost to Inter already 2-0, Napoli 1-0, Atalanta 1-0, and then of course that drumming at the hands of the Rossoneri last week. And I think part of the problem with that is players like Cristiano Ronaldo have suddenly gone a bit missing. He's been a bit inconsistent as late. He went 3 games without a goal, then 2 late strikes to win it against Udinese, then drew a blank against AC Milan, then a goal against Sassuolo. That was his 100th for the club. I'm not going to blame him too much. There are obviously greater issues running through that side. I mean, even Chiesa, someone that we've been lauding on this channel over and over again, he's gone a bit missing recently. 1 goal and 2 assists in his last 7 Juventus matches there for Chiesa. Kulusevski, I mean, I think after kind of an explosive start, a really promising start for Juventus, it's not been that wonderful for him. 1 goal and 1 assist in the last 20 games. If you're going to start pointing fingers in Chirin, I think maybe he's someone that needs to have a look at his contribution this season. But yeah, I mean, Juventus, for me, their only hope in this one is that Inter Milan kind of relax going into that as already the champions, if you know what I mean. But even so, I think Inter will have the bit between their teeth. They know this is a giant opportunity to not only sort of push on that their kind of domination over Juventus for the season, but to really kind of lock Juventus out of the Champions League positions, which is going to be huge. If we look at their run-in for Juventus, they've got Atalanta after this in the Coppa Italia, and then they've got 11th place Bologna, so it doesn't get any easier necessarily. I mean, Bologna had a bit of a sort of here or thereabout season, but this is huge. As we were saying, their form is just not really as good as their rivals. Napoli have lost 1 of their last 14 games and scored 9 in the last 2. Interesting to see rumours that Gennaro Gattuso might be on his way to Fiorentina. I'm reading that midweek from Fabrizio Romano. It'll be interesting to sort of get a quick opinion on that. But, you know, Atalanta have lost 1 in 16 as well. Milan beat them 3-0 at the weekend, obviously, and then Torino 7-0 on Wednesday. Go check out the highlights on that game. Some absolutely scorching goals. I saw Dougie, you lauding Theo Fernandez down the left-back slot there. And, you know, this weekend, to add a bit more spice to it, Atalanta and AC Milan can seal top 4 at the weekend if they win their games because they've got a better head-to-head than Juventus. Napoli need 2 wins and hope that Juventus lose to Inter. So it's interesting we're saying that poor form against the big sides really coming back to haunt Juventus as we come into the final stretch. But yeah, like I said, in my opinion, they just need Inter to almost be on like holiday mode, but I just can't quite see that happening.
Yeah, they've been absolutely relentless into Milan. It was interesting against Sassuolo that Adrian Rabiot scored a great goal with a bit of freedom. Like he's got so many athletic capabilities, but you just never see him really make any driving runs forward. And he scored a great goal against Sassuolo, arrowing it into the bottom right-hand corner after beating a couple of men. And I just thought, I want to see more of that from Rabiot. But anyway, it's not all on Rabiot. They've been a bit poor all over the park this year, Juventus. But McCubs, in direct contrast, Inter Milan just keeps steamrolling on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've coasted to this title, haven't they? They've only dropped points in 5 of their last 29 league games, only losing 1 of those as well. That solitary defeat came against Sampdoria on the 6th of January. So 2021 has really been their year, hasn't it? And it's mad to think that in those kind of opening 6 weeks, we were quite worried about their defence, weren't we? Conte was kind of experimenting a bit back there, playing Kolarov as a centre back. Wasn't really working. But since then, they've been so solid at the back. Bastoni in particular has really come into his own this season, hasn't he? And a big moment for them was that 2-0 win over Juve at the San Siro in mid-January. Vidal and Barella got the goals in that game, I seem to remember. And after drawing against Udinese in the following game, they went on to win 11 straight matches. And yeah, like you say, Dukes, they've just been relentless. Atalanta and Napoli are the only sides to have scored more than their 82 goals. Juve are the only side to come close to conceding as few as their 30 goals. And, even though they have been crowned champions, they're not looking like letting up. They thrashed Sampdoria 5-1 at the weekend with a brace from Alexis Sanchez. Obviously beat Roma on Wednesday night 3-1. Looked far the better team in that game. I think we were talking about Roma's defence last week in relation to Mourinho coming in, and he's got a right job in his hands because they were woeful at the back. But I think it's just, I don't know, like with Inter, it just looks like, especially this calendar year, they have looked kind of light years ahead of the competition. I know that Serie A is very competitive at kind of in that 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th area. There's a lot of teams that are quite evenly matched and have a lot of strengths, and especially, like going forward, there are a lot of really exciting attacks in the league this season, especially with kind of Napoli's revival this term as well. But Inter just seem to make it look, every game just look so simple, and I think that's testament not only to the likes of Lautaro and Lukaku, who've hardly put a foot wrong going forward, but also the likes of Brozovic and Barella, who are so good in the transition, aren't they? And Conte's style of football, to be fair, isn't particularly complicated. It's very it's very based on just width and speed and being solid at the back and catching teams and exposing their weaknesses on the break. And this team is just built for it, isn't it? And yeah, massive credit to the job that he's done over the last couple of years. And I think it's kind of good to shout out a few players who've maybe not got like a huge amount of credit this season. Gagliardini's been played in that midfield a lot, was being played over Eriksen a lot in those opening months of the season. That was a predicament that almost got Eriksen out of the club, but he's been very, very solid. 3 goals and 2 assists in 27 league games. Ivan Perisic, another player who we kind of questioned what he was doing out in the left wing back position, but he has contributed solidly when he's been called upon. Alexis Sanchez, like I was saying, he's come into really good form recently. But 7 goals and 5 assists with an average of 1 every 90 minutes, which isn't actually far off what Lukaku's scoring average has been like this season. He's averaging 2.7 key passes, averaging 2 dribbles. His expected goals and assists per 90 has actually gone up to 0.99. And I guess he has been coming on, I guess, late in games where there's been a bit more space against tired defences, especially recently. Just the defences in Serie A in general look pretty knackered. But nevertheless, it's been great to see his kind of career revive a bit over the last 12 months, because I think there was definitely a sense in those opening months of his Inter career that it just seemed like he was going further downhill even than the level he was at United. And yeah, after this game they play Udinese at home before being presented with that first Scudetto since 2010. So yeah, what a season it's been for Inter. Obviously, they've went out of the UCL really early on. That was a really disappointing exit, wasn't it? One of the worst kind of performances I've seen from a big side in the UCL in many years. Obviously, went out of the Coppa Italia against Juve as well. It's not been a perfect season for them, but in terms of Serie A, I think that's just it's very important that they that the investment they've put into their side has now paid off. And who knows? I think that that Champions League exit may well have helped them, because in such a congested season with so many of their other opponents still playing European football well into kind of March, April time. I think they probably got some well needed respite kind of between those games. Only playing kind of one game a week at points, which I think is has been really important for them, especially with a side with a number of ageing stars in it as well. But yeah, I think Inter are not going to let up in this. I think Conte is going to relish the opportunity to deny Juve a Champions League place. We've seen it with his previous sides. That Chelsea team were crowned champions pretty early. They kept on going. That his Juve sides were always crowned champions pretty early, especially in those first couple of years, or maybe not, maybe that second year at least, and they just kept on going, didn't they? Was it the unbeaten seasons and they get 100 points at one point, if I'm not wrong, as well? So I think I think Conte is going to be going for two comprehensive victories in these final two games.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's quite a lot riding on it, to be fair. I think they can get comfortably over 90 points as well, which would be way better than Juve did last year. It would be better than some of Allegri's last totals with Juve as well. So they're almost trying to put together a season that hasn't really been seen in Serie A for quite a while. And it's been clever in the last couple of games. I feel like Conte's used his squad quite effectively as well. We saw Vecino play against Roma, who hasn't had a lot of game time. Gagliardini played against Sampdoria at the weekend, I believe. So they're looking pretty good to inflict a wound on Juve. Although Juve, go in with a pretty fit roster. Only Frabotta is out, who's a minor player left back. De Ligt, Bonucci and McKennie are at risk of suspension. For Inter Milan, it's just Kolarov and Arturo Vidal, neither of which would probably start this game anyway, who are out. Young, Darmian and Lukaku are at risk of suspension as well, but they're all available to play in this game. Head-to-head, well, Inter might have won the game at the San Siro 2-0 in January, which felt like a massive moment in the title race, but that was their only victory over Juventus in 11 previous games, with 7 defeats in that time. So the weight of history is against Inter, but obviously current momentum is well behind them. Henry Hill, we need a score prediction. Ibrahim Hashim is waiting with bated breath. Bated breath even.
Bated breath. I think what you just said about them using the squad and rotating is going to be a huge factor here. Obviously, Juve have had to throw a lot of resources to win these previous games. A big effort versus Sassuolo midweek. So I'm going to go for Inter. I think they'll be fresher. Ooh. And like you said, they're going to push on for this. I'm going to go for a 3-1 victory with a couple of goals in the last 10 minutes. I reckon there'll be a few breakaway goals there as Juventus go out for it. That's my prediction.
Crushing from Henry Hill. I love that. Okay. McCubs, what are you going for?
You mentioned Darmian there. I forgot to give him a shout out as well. He's been really excellent when he's played recently, hasn't he? He's got a couple of really important goals in this run-in as well. I'm going to counteract that though. I think I'm going to say Juve 2-1. It's just too big a game for them. Like, if they don't come through this, then they're pretty stuffed, aren't they? Considering those run-ins. So yeah, I'm going to say Juve just about.
Okay. I mean, I'll have to accept that. I'm going to go with 2-1 for Inter. I think Henry's point about locking them out of the Champions League, and the consequences that come from that, with maybe Dybala or Cristiano Ronaldo having to go, the gap might, only increase over the next few years if Antonio Conte sticks around. I think they'll be pretty motivated. I'm going 2-1 for Inter. Guys, get your score predictions in the comments down below, and let's move on to our quickfire question. Our quickfire question, we're going to do this absolutely rapido because we've been droning on and on, although I hope you guys have enjoyed the show. But anyway, the quickfire question comes in from Tyler F0116, and it's, will Jesse Marsch be a success at RB Leipzig? What's your opening thoughts on this, Henry? We obviously discussed Mourinho last week. Jesse Marsch, big job.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting choice. It's worked for them before. That pathway between Salzburg and Leipzig as well, trodden. He'll know a lot of the squad when he turns up as well. he tends to play 4-2-2-2, that kind of narrow formation, which is what Leipzig used to play before Nagelsmann kind of changed it up a little bit. So they won't be too adverse to that going into it this year. I think it will certainly be exciting. That Salzburg side were great over the last 2 years. So I think this is almost the perfect appointment. I'm not surprised by it at all. There are so many managerial changes going on in every other league other than the Premier League, it seems to be at the moment. This one for me is one of the ones that makes sense the most. Yeah, I'm really excited to see it work. He's obviously been in the Red Bull system a long time, and it's perfect to see him rise up through the pyramid like this. So yeah, thumbs up from me, really.
Fair. McCubs, are you hot or not on this?
Thumbs up from me as well.
Oh,
I'm back. I mean, it seems like the very much the logical choice, doesn't it? It's how the Red Bull group seem to operate in general, in terms of making those transitions. And I imagine like Henry was saying, he'd worked with a player like Szoboszlai very closely. I'm looking forward to seeing him be given a bigger role in the side next season. But and I imagine perhaps there might be a few more signings from the Salzburg camp as well, considering that the defence obviously needs work with Upamecano and probably Konate leaving as well. But it kind of depends what we class as success at Leipzig, don't we? Because I always feel like it's a little bit of a grey area, because the Bundesliga has obviously been so difficult to win over the last few years. Bayern always find a way to win it comfortably as well. They may have their first trophy in the bag by the time you're watching this. Obviously had that DFB Pokal final on Thursday night after we filmed this. I think it kind of success seems to be just kind of carrying on that kind of conveyor belt really at Leipzig of playing good football, attracting good players, selling players for big profits. I kind of feel like that's what Leipzig is. Is he going to be the man to actually bring the Bundesliga to Leipzig? I'm not so sure, because I think Nagelsmann is the generational manager, isn't he? And I think he was the guy to do that, and he's gone to Bayern now. So I think he will be a success at Leipzig, but I don't think he's not going to be a step up on Nagelsmann, is he? And he's going to be inheriting a slightly weaker squad as well. So I would temper my expectations. I think if he can get Champions League football in his first year, I think that should be seen as a success. And then I guess they've got to see where they go from there.
Yeah, no, it will be difficult for him going in there as Nagelsmann's replacement. That's no doubt. But the advantage is he's actually been there as an assistant beforehand. I think he was Ralf Rangnick's assistant when he was in charge there. So that's a bonus for him.
True.
I think one temper as well. I think they were very good in the Champions League in 2019-20. Less impressive this year, although they did have a very difficult group in Bayern and Atletico as well. So I'm not necessarily going to tarnish him with that brush. And obviously they had Hwang Hee-chan, Minamino, Haaland in 2019-20 as well, or at least for half of it. So yeah, we'll see how it goes for Jesse Marsch, but a very difficult job and big shoes to fill in the space of Julian Nagelsmann. But guys, that is all we've got time for on Continental Club for this week. I hope you guys have enjoyed the show. We covered players wasted at their clubs. We talked about Inter Milan versus Juve. We talked about Jesse Marsch. We literally gave you a little bit of everything. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Henry, if they've enjoyed it, what should they go and watch now?
Oh, go check out this week's podcast. It's me with Will Brazier,
Yes.
which is a real treat, talking about the championship, all the big stories, everything that went down there. So if you want to hear less about Inter and more about Luton Town, that is the place to go. But no, it was really fun. Really enjoyed it. So yeah, please go give that some support.
And Henry looked an excellent colour as well. He looked really healthy. So go check that out as well. I listened to the first start of it and it sounded excellent. So I'm looking forward to tucking into the rest of that. McCubs, anything from you?
Oh yeah, there's lots to tuck into on EFD. Go show the EFD Explained on 50+1 and whether it could work in the Premier League. That was out last weekend. Also, Hamill did a one-on-one on the British Super League. Could Rangers and Celtic join the English Premier League? Go and check those out. Go and check out our scout reports. I think a scout report out yesterday. Just check it all out.
Perfect. There's lots to watch and get your teeth stuck into. Have great weekends and we'll catch you next week. Bye.